Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe here. We got a packed show for you today. It is our Browns-Ravens preview edition. So it's going to start off Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock. They join me, and we are going to go through the storylines for this game as the Browns and Ravens both trying to avoid 0-2 starts. There's been lots of trash talk, lots of back and forth, all sorts of stuff going on Sunday. We're going to talk about it in the opening segment. Then Lance Reisland is going to join us to give a scouting report on the Ravens and make his pick. Then Kay and Ashley back on. We're going to make our picks for Sunday's game. Hey, listen, if you're not a football insider, get involved. cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. You get a newsletter. You can become one of our texters. Check that out. Again, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. And I can't say this enough. Please go to our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Get subscribed. We put our podcasts up there in video form. This podcast is going to be up there in video form as well. And of course, we try to go live on Sundays, usually around 8 o'clock for our post-game podcast. So you want to get subscribed on our YouTube. There's a lot more there too as well. Just go look for Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. And one more thing, if you are watching this on YouTube and you're not subscribed to the pod on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, we would love it if you could subscribe and download there as well. Just search Orange and Brown Talk on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Okay, let's go. Our Browns-Ravens preview edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. All right, everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, our preview edition, the Browns at the Ravens in week 2. We got a lot coming up. Of course, Lance Reisland will have his scouting report. We'll make our picks. But to start things off, me, Kay, Ashley, we're going to talk about storylines for this weekend. Oh boy, are there some storylines for this week's game. So let's get to it here quickly. I don't know, Kay, where do you want to start? Because there are a million different ways we can go when I say the word storylines, because the last 2 days, really just the last week in general, have been very, very eventful.
Well, there are some on-field things that we could go with, but let's start with the trash talking. Let's have a little bit of fun. There was some trash talking that came out of the Browns locker room yesterday and today. Now, yesterday, it was Jerry Jeudy. When he was asked about the Browns secondary, he said, no challenges. And then today, I asked Grant Delpit about how hard it is to take down Derrick Henry. Innocent question, right? Not a leading question. And he said, not hard. So 4 words. We've got no challenges and not hard. And those four words are looming very large over there in the Ravens locker room. Derrick Henry has already responded. He said, we'll see on Sunday. I saw that. So they're taking notice. And I sort of feel like the Browns are shooting their shot a little bit. They're 11.5-point dogs in this game. They feel disrespected. They know no one is giving them any kind of a chance whatsoever. And I think they're trying to say, hey, world, we're here too. And so we're going to have to all see how it goes when they all put it out on the grass on Sunday.
Yeah, listen, I'm sure that Kevin Stefanski feels very differently about this than we do. We love it when stuff like this happens, when guys are not just boring and just saying what they're supposed to say. But at the same time, look, the Browns have had some success against Derrick Henry. Week 18, obviously last year it did not go very well, but I almost don't count that game when we talk about this. I don't know. I mean, to me, again, I like it. Look, this is football. It's sports. It's entertainment. It's fun. But also, Ashley, if you're going to talk like this and you're an 0-1 football team, like the Ravens are, you better show up, and you better make sure that if you're Grant Delpit, you aren't on the receiving end of one of those very famous Derrick Henry stiff arms. Or if you're Jerry Jeudy, you better make sure that you don't drop passes this week. You're just putting a lot of pressure on yourself, which is fine, but you just better make sure.
Yeah, and, I think I said this on our video today. I thought that the Browns had all this outward sort of bulletin board material just handed to them on a silver platter this week, right? Really 2 things. The Ravens' 30th anniversary celebration, obviously how upset Browns fans are about that, and I think that's a nice motivational factor. And then also Joe Flacco's first time returning to Baltimore and how much these guys love Joe and would want to get a win for him in that situation. And after these last 2 days, all I can think is, man, the Browns just handed the Ravens some bulletin board material right back. And it's funny because I almost felt like this week that they were purposely going out of their way to not really say much about the 30th anniversary celebration, right? They acknowledged it, but they weren't saying anything super like incendiary or anything about it. And to me, it almost felt like one of those things like, okay, don't give them anything about this. Like, we know it's going to be motivation, but just don't be talking about it. Because, like, the interesting thing was even when we talked to these younger players and brought it up, no one said, oh, I wasn't aware that was happening until you just asked about it, right? Like, there obviously was enough background knowledge that people knew it was happening. So they went out of their way to do that. And then, as Mary Kay said, these 4 little words, I'm like, oh my goodness, this has just gotten verbally chippy all of a sudden. And it's not in a way I expected. I thought a lot of it would be centered around this 30th anniversary stuff this week. But look, the other funny part of this to me was Derrick Henry referencing something a Browns coach said that he thought he saw. And I truly could only find the most complimentary quotes from Kevin Stefanski and Jim Schwartz. Obviously, this coaching staff goes out of its way to not say anything. So that being said, I think the Ravens would have found something and Derrick Henry would have found something, even if these 4 little words didn't happen this week.
You know, it's funny that Grant is kind of front and center in all of this too, because and folks are going to hear this when we do our scouting report in the next segment. Like, I think Grant Delpit's actually an important character this week on this defense, and it actually has nothing to do with Derrick Henry. I think he's important because you've got to figure out a way to keep Lamar Jackson in check in the run game. And Carson Schlesinger is, of course, the obvious candidate, and he'll certainly be involved. Myles Garrett is one of the few guys, one of the few edge rushers who can reasonably make up ground and chase down Lamar Jackson. But I think Grant Delpit is a guy that they really need to step up this week, because I think you could potentially put him in the box. I don't know if they're going to do this, but you could potentially put him in the box and sort of tell him, like, you need to be our spy on Lamar in a few plays. So it's just interesting, Mary Kay, that here's Grant Delpit kind of putting himself front and center. And I think he is a very important character in this football game, if the Browns do, in fact, choose to use him as one of the guys who's going to have to spy on Lamar Jackson.
Well, I think when we look at Grant Delpit for this season, once again, he has challenged himself to do more. And we've heard that year after year after year. And I think saying something like this, he's kind of throwing down his own gauntlet so that he has to live up to it. He's putting the target on his own back. And sometimes it works like that for a guy. They know what motivates them. People are motivated by different things. Some people are motivated by praise. Other people are motivated by slights. Some people are motivated by a kick in the pants. And I think that Grant Delpit has a method to his madness here. I think he's up to something. I think he wants to, like I said, put a target on his own back so that he has to come out and have the game of his life and show up on that football field. That's what I think is going on here. We'll see if he can do it.
Yeah, and the Browns need it. There just hasn't been any playmaking from that safety position here for a few years, and they really just desperately need one of these guys to kind of step up and do something. And this is an opportunity against this team. Listen, that's the beauty of sports. That's the beauty of football. Sunday we get to find out. And these guys will either be in the locker room on Sunday after the game taking victory laps, or in the locker room after the game on Sunday trying to figure out what went wrong. And that's the beauty of it all. We get to find out how this all goes on Sunday. So at least at least it's not a boring week. That's always good in week 2. Ashley, what do you have as a storyline for us?
Well, since we've already talked this week about Joe going back about this 30th anniversary thing, I guess we can talk more about it when we get to you if you want, Dan, but I'll leave those for you. And I'm going to go with Quinshon Judkins and the Browns run game, because that run game was practically non-existent against the Bengals. I think the Ravens are going to be so determined to not let Joe Flacco, their former quarterback, beat them. So I think the Browns are going to have to get something going in the run game this week. And obviously what happens with Quinshon Judkins is going to be a big part of it. We saw him out at practice today. He was going through the early portion of the drills. Mary Kay wrote about it. You can see a little video of some of what he did over on our YouTube. So that to me is maybe the biggest question about this Browns offense is obviously how is he going to look? How much are they going to use him? Is he going to be on a pitch count? What is he going to be able to do in terms of inflicting damage on this Ravens defense? And how much of a difference is he going to be able to make right out of the gate in this Browns offense. So this saga with him is coming to an end. And I'm just really curious to see, assuming he plays on Sunday, what that is going to look like.
I'm really interested in this run game in general because obviously, Quinshon, a healthy Quinshon Judkins, ready to go, full go is going to help this run game. But I also think one of my concerns is I think there was more to the running issues on Sunday than just who was running the football. And I think there were a lot of offensive line issues. I mean, if this really is supposed to be a return to a more Kevin Stefanski-esque scheme, you should be able to get some of that run game going, even if you don't have your bell cow back there. So that's part of it. They've got to clean up. They've got to figure out whatever was happening with that offensive line and whatever they were missing, whatever they were doing wrong. And a few offensive linemen have sort of indicated too, like they just weren't winning their matchups. There were some guys uncovered. Like they've got to do a better job up front. But that being said, Mary Kay, certainly having Quinshon Judkins, who, as I said, they've said is going to be their bell cow back, certainly having him out there will help whatever the offensive line needs to do. And it'll put Dylan Sampson, right, in a role that suits him a little better, that pass catching role, that change of pace role. It puts Jerome Ford in a better role. It just puts everybody kind of back where they're supposed to be.
Well, apparently the running game is going to be a bit of a work in progress. I thought that it would be strong out of the gate. I thought that they would be able to run the ball against the Bengals. Now, the Bengals, of course, have a new defensive coordinator. They were smart enough, I think, to show some different looks, to show some things that the Browns were not ready for necessarily and really hadn't game planned for. So I think that had something to do with it. Joel believes that the problems were very, very correctable, that when they went back and they watched this film, that they can see how they left guys unblocked. They can see what they did. And he is optimistic that they're going to get it corrected. So I agree with you, Dan, that it wasn't just what was going on with those running backs, because we know that Jerome Ford is way better than averaging 1.4 yards per carry. I suspect that Dylan Sampson is better than 2.4 yards and that the Browns in general can average more than 2 yards per carry against the Bengals. This is not the Ravens' run defense. The Ravens finished number 1 in the NFL in run defense last year. So they're bumping up against a much better run defense come Sunday. And they better hope that they got their problems corrected, because it's going to be a lot tougher to run on this Ravens defense, I think, than it was against the Bengals. So it might not matter too much who you have back there if they don't get their blocking issues figured out and solved. So we're going to have to see what they have come Sunday. But they're going up against a very, very veteran, savvy run defense. And for the Browns on their side of the ball, it's new, it's different. They have a new coach in Mike Bloomgren. They have a return to some of the older blocking type of schemes and the wide zone running game and all that sort of stuff. But it's obviously not a well-oiled machine yet. So let's see how much they were able to get corrected in 1 week. And let's see what kind of a difference adding Quinshon to the mix can do for them, because they need help. They need to be a balanced attack. They can't have Joe Flacco teeing on, like throwing the ball 50 times a game and having the Ravens tee off on their former quarterback, who they are going to really want basically his scalp anyways this game. So this is going to be a tough football game, and the Browns are going to need to have their ground game, and I'll be interested to see if they found it.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, Ashley, is like Joe Flacco threw the ball a ton last week. And I'm with Mary Kay on this. Like, that is not a sustainable way for this team to win football games. Again, that Bengals defense, I just don't know. We'll see over time how that plays out. But this Ravens defense is not going to, you're just not going to be able to get away with that with Joe Flacco. Like, you've got to protect him in some ways. And Joe's fearless. Joe's going to push the ball downfield. That's why you have him out there. But also you want to make sure that even though those 2 interceptions weren't his fault, he's going to throw a few this season that are going to be his fault. And you don't want that to happen against this defense. You've got to be able to protect him a little bit and run the football better, because it's just not a formula to win if he's throwing it 40, 45 times a game.
Yeah, again, the Browns had 49 rushing yards on 24 carries in that game. They averaged 2 yards per carry. The longest run they had in that game was a 5-yard run from Dylan Sampson. And Dylan Sampson, again, played really good, I thought, in that first game. But most of what he was able to do came in the pass game. And I think he carved out a nice little niche in this offense for himself in doing that. But they do just need help. And with this Ravens team, compared to the Bengals, yeah, like you do wonder if they do have to lean on Joe Flacco too much in that pass game and he starts trying to do too much. That is when I think he gets prone to throwing those interceptions that are his fault and not like the fluky ones that we saw on Sunday. So, yeah, I mean, I just think obviously it's not sustainable for 40-year-old Joe Flacco to go out every single week and be throwing 45 passes. That's just not going to happen.
Okay. My storyline, I mean, you were right, Ashley. I could have gone with Joe Flacco. I could have gone with this 30th anniversary celebration. I feel like we have covered a lot of that. So I just want to talk more like globally, I guess, about this football team. I feel like this is kind of the week when we are going to find out sort of who the 2025 Cleveland Browns are. Even if they lose this game, and obviously you don't want to be 0-2, and that puts you in a spot where things could spiral a little bit because I'm telling you, Green Bay. I don't know how we're recording this before the Thursday night game, so maybe they get lit up for like 50 points. I think that Green Bay team is really good. Mary Kay, to me, this is the week, more so than the Bengals week, because I don't trust that Bengals defense. Those games are always weird. Week 1 is weird. To me, we really get to find out about this football team this week. Can you go into Baltimore? Can you really compete with a team that is expected to compete for and win a Super Bowl? I don't think the Browns are as good as the Baltimore Ravens. I think over 17 games, we'll see that separation. But for this one Sunday, based on what happened this last week where you lost that game because of some mistakes that you made and some missed kicks, can you go into that place with everything that's been going on? And can you show that you belong on the same field as the Baltimore Ravens? I feel like this is kind of the let's find out about the Cleveland Browns week. Like, we're going to come away from this game having a decent feeling about how maybe the next month or so is going to go.
Well, I think there's a couple of things here that come to my mind about this game and what could possibly go right for them to be able to walk out of there with a victory, or at least with their heads held very, very high. First of all, they feel very disrespected. They're 11.5-point underdogs. That is sticking in their craw. They don't like that. Then I do think that they're going to try to find some way to work themselves up into a little bit of a frenzy over the 30-year anniversary thing. It's going to be all their hoopla and all the joy going on, and they're going to want to wreck that party for the Ravens. They're going to want to do that. And then how deep can Joe Flacco dig to come up with the game of his, maybe not the game of his career, but one of the best games of his career, and really try to stick it to the team that dumped him for Lamar Jackson in 2018. Somebody needs to remind him. The Cleveland Browns need to remind him that the Ravens completely dumped him in 2018 after he took them to the playoffs 6 times, the AFC Championship game 3 times, won a Super Bowl for them, and then he had a hip injury in 2018. Lamar comes in, goes 6-1, and it's bye-bye, Joe. And he's got to remember what that felt like when that happened. He floundered for a while after that. The magic only came back for Joe when he got off the couch and came here in 2023. Other than that, it's been a long, hard road and some difficult times in the game of football for him. Now, fortunately for him, he was able to revive and rejuvenate his career here with the Cleveland Browns. But he's going to have to find something within himself to go in there and say, what you people did to me was not right. And then the Browns are going to have to say, what this city did to the city of Cleveland was not right. And they're going to have to play over their capabilities and over their heads. Not going to be easy. It's a young football team, the Cleveland Browns are. They're going up against a savvy football team that went 12-5 last year. You don't go 12-5 by accident. They are a very, very good football team. They're very explosive offensively. You've got storylines galore on their side. You've got Todd Monken, who had a very bad experience here, working for Freddie Kitchens and trying to hold everybody's act together when he was the offensive coordinator here. So you have things on their side. Now you've got Derrick Henry feeling kind of slighted by Grant Delpit. You have a secondary that was called out by Jerry Jeudy. So there's going to be a lot of emotion in this game. There's going to be a lot of intensity, a lot of storylines. And I think the Browns have it in them because, look, anytime you have Myles Garrett, you can wreck somebody's offense. You can wreck somebody's offense when you have Myles Garrett. You saw what he did to the Bengals offense in the second half of that game. When he decides to put on the Superman cape, he can be unstoppable. So they have it in them. They have it in them to do this, but they're just going to have to actually go out there and do it. And also, do not let the Ravens take the ball away from you and find a way to take it away from them. That's got to be on the bingo card for Sunday.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of the guys we've talked about, you said it, this is a young team, but the guys we've talked about, Joe Flacco, Grant Delpit, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Njoku, Jerry Jeudy, like these guys aren't young, right? Like Joel Bitonio, the O-line, those are veterans. So those guys kind of need to lead this thing, right? They need to make sure that like whatever needs to get done, whatever message needs to be delivered, we're going to make sure it gets delivered to these young guys so that when they do go into this environment, they can operate and they can function. I said it at the beginning of the week. I think it was the Hey MK pod, maybe, Ashley. Like, I wanted to see a little anger out of this team. I wanted to see a little fight out of this team. And I think we've gotten that. I wouldn't mind seeing a little pregame scuffle, even when we're sitting there in M&T Bank Stadium before the game. But now we get to find out. Now we get to find out who the Cleveland Browns are a little bit.
Yeah, that's the best part about all this, right? At the end of the day, you have to go out and play the game. And we talk about it, and they can talk about it, and talk about it, and fans can talk about it until everyone is blue in the face. But on Sunday afternoon, they're going to go out there, and they're going to play the game after this 30th anniversary celebration stuff, but they are going to play a football game, and we're going to find out what happens. And, all week in the lead up to this game, when I've done the radio and stuff, and just getting asked, like, well, what was the demeanor of this team after that Bengals loss? And I think I said this on our post-game pod, maybe, that, I think the locker room, even though they lost, it felt very different to me from last year when they would lose, and that sense of defeat. I mean, you could almost feel it. It was palpable. This didn't feel like that. It felt like guys who knew some things didn't go their way. They had to clean some stuff up, but they were able to take the good with the bad, like especially the defense, right? They played so well in the second half of that game against Cincy. They just didn't have the start they wanted. They cleaned up some of their miscommunications, and they were mad about losing, I think, like the right amount. I think they are fired up enough heading into this Baltimore game, and that's what you want, right? You want them to have emotion tied up in this, a healthy amount, to get that extra motivation that could be an X factor. So yeah, I feel okay about where they are in that regard right now, especially compared to last year.
Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Lance Reisland will give us his scouting report on the Ravens, and then we will come back and we will make our picks for Sunday's game in Baltimore. Welcome back to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, joined as we are every Thursday by Lance Reisland here on our preview podcast. Lance, how are you?
I'm very well, Dan. How are you tonight, buddy?
Doing well. All right, let's get to it. Let's talk some Baltimore Ravens football here, your scouting report on the Ravens. And let's start with the big dogs, right? Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. Let's specifically start with Henry. He, of course, has been the subject of some trash talk today as we're recording this. Grant Delpit saying he's not hard to bring down. I would disagree with that assessment. When you look at Derrick Henry, though, I mean, just an ageless wonder. He's 30 years old. Like, you don't see running backs last like Derrick Henry has lasted. And if it weren't for that fumble on Sunday night, it would have been just an incredible football game from him. How has he stayed so good? What does he look like right now?
Well, you said it best. I did some kind of like wondering how, like, there's not a position in the NFL that falls off more than the backs, right? So it's not, they don't go from like a 10 to an 8 to a 6. They go from a 10 to a 1. And he, for some reason, has just stayed at a 10. And he really takes care of his body in the offseason. He's a guy who eats right, does all those things physically, for taking care of his body, spends a lot of money, LeBron style, on his body. That's the first thing he does. Secondly, the style that he runs at, he's a physical guy who runs really, really, he runs upright. It's when you watch him, it's amazing because he's moving fast, but he doesn't really look like he's moving fast. He does not get enough credit. He understands what his offensive linemen are trying to do. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that the elite backs, they know the fronts and coverages and things like that as well as the quarterbacks. And that's another thing Derrick Henry, that you could tell he does very well. And then he's just, he's in a great system. right? He's in a system where the entire offensive line are just massive humans. They run gap, they run power. I think Todd Monken's one of the top offensive coordinators in football. It does whatever the defense. There's sometimes he screens more. There's sometimes he does a really good job of attacking what the defense does. Derrick Henry, like you said, he's ageless, but it's not an accident. He takes care of himself, and he's in a great scheme, and he's on a really good football team.
The Browns, of course, weirdly, week 18 aside, last season, he ran all over him, but I almost don't count that week. They've weirdly had some success against him. They've weirdly kept him under control. He's had very few really big games against them. I do wonder, though, with the direction the Browns have gone in the middle, right? Mason Graham, they've kind of had him lose a little weight. He's playing a different style. Maybe him playing at Michigan and how he had to play there is going to help him in this matchup. Malik Collins is more of a rusher. Even the guys they bring in behind those guys, right? Whether it's Mike Hall, Shelby Harris. I don't know if Mike's going to play this week or not. I'm forgetting somebody, but the guys they bring in behind them, those guys are rushers. Is that good or bad for the Browns this week in this matchup?
It's not good, in my opinion, but I think Shelby Harris is a guy who plays pretty heavy at times. So he's a guy who can kind of, and Mason Graham, I agree with you. This is a tough week for Malik Collins because what Malik Collins can do is that he's big enough with that explosion off the ball. And the thing that I like about it is they're not going to wait. And part of the problem is if you're a two-gap team or you're a guy you're a team who plays on a line of scrimmage, that can be troublesome because these guys are as good at double teams as I've seen in the NFL. They're really, really good at getting hip to hip and knocking you off the ball. I think it hasn't been on accident, and this Browns defense is no joke. So the thing I like about them is they're not going to wait. So they're going to do what they do, and that's important because they got to penetrate and they got to kind of get to the double teams or beat the double teams before they happen. But you're going to see, if I see anybody Mason Graham's a guy with that Michigan background is going to be really good. I think Shelby Harris is going to be a guy. But I also think they're going to have to crowd the line of scrimmage. I think they're going to have to use those linebackers. They're going to have to show six. Try to eliminate some of those double teams by your pre-snap alignment. That's one of my keys to the game is showing six so you can eliminate double teams. Because whether you bring six or not, they have to make sure that they have everything accounted for up front. So not a great matchup in terms if you don't have great get off, if Lamar Jackson is working his snap count, things like that, and they're waiting it all. Because if they beat you off the line of scrimmage with the size they are, it's tough. But I think the Browns are going to play them tough inside, and I think this is as much of it as a tough matchup for the Browns. I think the Ravens people are talking the same thing about this defensive line and their ability to penetrate and get in gaps.
So before we get to Lamar, let's spend a little more time on that Ravens O-line. Like you said, they're a big physical group. It's just how they play. It's how they've always played. And I texted you. I was watching when I was rewatching the Bills-Ravens game. I think it was Monday morning. Like the stuff that both those teams were doing with their O-lines was really cool, especially in the screen game. I thought It was really fun to watch. Where is this Ravens O-line at right now?
Well, the first thing is they're huge. I mean, and they're guys with, that's the Ravens style of guys up front on both sides of the ball. They're even NFL big. So they're guys who are all 320 to 350. Lele might be 400 pounds. But, they're athletic. They can move. They're multiple run scheme. Like I said, I think Todd Monken is an outstanding coordinator. So they have to do everything. What I mean by that is the same thing with the Browns. They got to be able to block gap. They got to be able to block zone. They got to get out on screens. They're okay in pass protection. Rosengard is their best pass protector, but he'll struggle with Miles a little bit because he's an athlete. And he can really he struggles a little bit with guys who are power to speed. But what they do is they win on first down so much that they're in these run-pass situations where they don't really have to if they have to simply pass protect, they're not great. These are road graders. These are guys who like to get off the ball. They do really creative in this run game. So, you always hear the word zone read. Well, they really have run options, right? You hear run pass options, but they're just not reading the backside end. They're actually getting lead blockers out for Lamar Jackson a bunch. It's really, really cool. They're going to run zone one way with Derrick Henry. They're going to read the backside end, and then they're going to have guys out in front in case Lamar Jackson pulls it. That's really, really unique, and they do some really cool stuff with it. And obviously, Lamar Jackson makes that work. But this offensive line is very well coached. And again, they're long, they're good with their punch, they get off the ball. It's a really good bunch. This is a really good offense.
So let's talk Lamar. Obviously, everybody knows what he's capable of with his legs, the way he's grown as a passer. I mean, that throw to DeAndre Hopkins, obviously Hopkins' catch gets the headlines, but that throw was such a good throw, and Jim Schwartz even pointed that out on Thursday. He's just really developed so well in that area. Who do you think defensively? Carson Schwarzenegger's the easy answer, and maybe that is the answer. Who do you think defensively is the key to the Browns making sure Lamar doesn't kill them on Sunday?
I think it's great. I think Schwarzenegger's the easy answer, but I think it's Grant Delpit. And
I'm glad you said that. I've been thinking that too.
I think it's Grant Delpit because Grant Delpit is athletic, and this is the kind of game that Grant Delpit can play, right? Because one thing about Lamar Jackson is I'm glad you said that, because what people don't understand is Lamar Jackson has now entered the top 10 as a pocket passer, and good for him. But now he's probably one or two in the run game as a quarterback, but he is really good from the pocket. He's always read defense as well. People always think he wasn't a guy who could do that. He has always done that well. But if I'm the Browns, there's interesting things. Some of the things he's really struggled with are teams that give him lots and lots of pressure, or teams that kind of stand on the line of scrimmage. And then the Browns kind of do a little bit of both. But I see the Browns still crowding the line of scrimmage and then using Grant Delpit as that spy, as a guy he's athletic enough, he's fast enough. But they're going to need a bunch of different guys. They're going to show a bunch of different looks. Schwarzenegger's a guy who can do it. Schwarzenegger's way better than a rookie. This guy is going to be really, really good. But if I had to pick somebody, I'll go with Delpit, just because athletically he can. Not everybody. I don't think obviously he's not as good an athlete as Lamar, but he's in that range. And the Browns have a lot of second level guys. And you talked about how they've given Henry credit, trouble and things like that. That's because the Browns scheme is really good, and they got good players on defense. The Browns are really good on defense.
So let's talk about that Ravens defense then. It's funny. I saw on Twitter, so there were some Ravens fans who weren't happy with that performance Sunday. Obviously, look, they gave up a ton of points. But I wonder, when you watched that game and you look at this Ravens defense, how much of that was actual struggles from that defense, and how much of it was like, hey, man, you're playing Josh Allen. And Josh Allen, just like the guy on the other side, Josh Allen is Superman out there.
Well, their secondary is okay. Malachi Starks is a guy, I've always said that, a rookie's a rookie, and as good as he is, and he's really good. And then, the funny thing about Kyle Hamilton is that he's a guy, as good as he is, and he covers well and things like that, but he can be had a little bit in the run pass game just because he's so aggressive. He's also a guy, he struggles with guys who are sudden and twitchy in the slot. They make him do so many different things. And then, they moved Humphrey inside, and I think it's a great move by them. It's made their defense really good, but he's lost a little bit he maybe lost a step. So after Wiggins, they're just okay at that second, third corner. And then if they can find matchups once in a while where Humphrey has to cover in the slot. So they're not as good in the pass game. What makes them really good is that they, like we always talked about back in our draft pods, they draft for them. So they just have these mammoth guys inside, and they play this, that mint odd front where they're covering. And Travis Jones, if you remember, is a guy who loved out of Connecticut. He's 360 pounds. So he's a guy, he does not going to ever pass rush, but he's a guy who just anchors a gap. Then they got, Matabuke, and they got, then they got those outside guys, Owe and Van Noy. They're just like these 6'6" guys with long arms. Obviously, Roquan Smith in the middle. They got a rookie in there that I think they can attach in the pass game next to Roquan. But just the defense as a whole, super aggressive, super physical. If you can be had, it can be had in play action if you can establish a little bit of the run game. And as good as they are up front, it's really the scheme, right? It's that Steeler-Ravens odd front that you just don't see often, and you don't see with the size of this defense. These guys are massive up front.
Okay, I want to ask you, this isn't about the Ravens, this is about the Browns, but you mentioned establishing the run, and you've had some time to really go watch that game. And one of the things I've been thinking is the concern I have, right? Maybe Quinshon Judkins is going to get out there. Maybe not. We'll see. But I think a lot of people are looking at that and saying, well, if you can get Quinshon out there, that's going to help. That's going to fix the run game. I think that's going to help the run game. But to me, I feel like this scheme, the way the Browns want to do this, that scheme should be able to get almost any back some sort of yard, better than it looked on Sunday. That makes sense. How much of those run struggles, now that you've watched this game a few times, how much of those struggles on the ground were the backs? How much of it was the O-line? Because a few O-linemen have talked about, like, hey, we just didn't do our job.
Well, Lucas didn't, I really liked Lucas when he came over here. I texted you guys earlier today. Lucas did not play very well. He, for some reason, he took really bad angles. So two things happened as I broke down trying to break down the run game, because the run game is so weird. In fact, like when people say, oh, they just got killed. And sometimes you just get overwhelmed and the whole defense is better. Dan, but here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, first of all, they're not getting any movement on their double teams. So it's like my dad always said, it's like two dancing bears. Those offensive linemen have to, their footwork have to be together. They have to get their hands together. Everything has to be, and that just takes reps. And they didn't do it a lot last year. And I know they're getting back to it. And everybody says, that's what they ran. It takes time, and they're going to get there. And it has nothing to do with their toughness, because it's either, when you block zone or you're double teaming, it's, do you have toughness and are you strong, and can you make it work, fundamentally and technique wise. Well, we know these guys, Teller, Batonio, these guys are tough. And we know that. So it's just a matter of technique. The second thing they did very poorly is they did not get to the second level, or they block the wrong guys. So there's one power play. I have a post coming out tomorrow. There's a power play where Sed Tillman's on the backside. He gets beat inside, and then they have a great deuce double team on the 3 technique from the Bengals, and DeJuan Jones doesn't come off the double team, even though he could, and the backer runs free. And literally everybody else has it well blocked. So 2 guys block it wrong. They get a 3-yard loss. But if you watch the film, I know those guys in the meeting room going, hey, we can clean this up. So they got to get a little bit nastier on those double teams, and they got to make sure they get to the second level, and they got to make sure they cut off backside. All that repetition stuff that they like to do, it's not as far off as people think. And I agree with you. Junkins helps the run game. And the reason he helps the run game is because he's heavier. So that gets them to 2nd and 6 a little bit more, right? And I know I've talked about that ad nauseum, but that's really important. And that's what he can do. He can get you to a manageable 2nd, 3rd down. But again, this run game in Stefanski with the pin and pull, the counter, the wide zone, they take advantage of what the defense. That's why he's so multiple. So it really comes down to that offensive line. The Browns' run game, it goes back to like the old Shanahan days with Terrell Davis. It doesn't really matter who the back is. Obviously, the better the back. Obviously, Nick Chubb's an example in his prime. You get the big, long runs. But this offense is made to get 4 to 6 yards in the run game, regardless of what they see. So it'll be a little bit tougher, because I think the Browns are going to run the ball better this week, because they're not going to run the ball in A and B gap very much, because no one does against Baltimore, because there's 900 pounds up there. So they're gonna attack. They're gonna press those edge. You're gonna see a lot of pin and pull. You're gonna see a lot of counter. You're gonna see those guards out in front trying to get the edge a little bit this week, if I had to guess.
All right. So as always, you get to make the first pick on the podcast. So what direction are you going for this game?
Well, I will say this. I'm going to preface it by saying I'm taking the Ravens, but I also want to say that this game is going to be a lot closer. This whole attitude of the Ravens are 11-point favorites. That's and I'm not really big on, they're celebrating all that stuff. It's the 11 guys on the field. And I will say this, the 11 guys on the Browns defense match up with the 11 guys on the Ravens offense. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is the outlier, right? So if they can contain him, if they have a spy plan and a contained plan on 3rd down and all that kind of stuff that we do as coaches, they're going to be just fine. I would be absolutely shocked if they're not in this game. I have them losing 24-21 because of Lamar Jackson. But this game comes down to the end, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns have a chance to win, and I'd be completely shocked if they're not in this game, because they've been told all week how terrible they are. And I always take your thought on this, right? Any given Sunday, and this is not a 1-31 Browns team. This is not a team that doesn't have talent at positions. These guys have talent, and they have talent at multiple levels. If they can get a turnover, create a short field, hit a play action pass over top of start, some things can happen, and it doesn't have to be luck. It just has to be taking advantage of the situation. But I think the Ravens, Lamar Jackson is the reason they win, but they win late. And the Browns are in it. Right,
there you go. Lance Reisland with his scouting report on the Ravens and his pick for the game. We're going to take a quick break here on our Orange Brown Talk preview podcast. When we come back, Mary Kay and Ashley will rejoin me, and we'll make our picks for Sunday's game. Lance, appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, guys, Dan here. Before we get to Mary Kay and Ashley and me making our game picks, let's look at some props in this game, just for fun. Just see what we can find. See if there's anything that we like. Obviously, the line on DraftKings as we're recording this is 11.5. The total is 45.5 on DraftKings. So do what you want with those. The Browns are plus 525 to win this game outright. We're going to make our picks We're going to make our picks here coming up, so I'm not really going to get into that stuff. Let's go through a couple of these props, though, that I like. There's one touchdown score prop that I really like. Now, I am admittedly eyeing that Ravens defense special teams touchdown. Unfortunately, I can kind of close my eyes and see a Joe Flacco strip sack or a Joe Flacco pick six, something like that. That makes me a little nervous. That's one that I'm kind of looking at plus 450. But there's one that really stands out as I scroll down through this. Rocket Sanders is plus 1,400 as an anytime touchdown scorer. Now, he has traditionally 1 week, right? What a tradition. But he was their short yardage back last week. So if you get in a goal line situation, even if Quinshon Judkins plays in this game, I think we could potentially see Rocket Sanders. Now, of course, the risk there is maybe if Quinshon Judkins is active, would that push Sanders to inactive status? So I don't know. We're not putting a ton on this, but maybe wait till inactives come out, and if Rocket Sanders is active, I don't know. I feel like that anytime touchdown score for Rocket Sanders could be really interesting. There's one other one that I liked here. I mean, there weren't a ton that I loved in this game, but the Ravens team total is 28.5. So if you really believe in this Browns defense, if you really think this Browns defense is going to be good, you can actually take that number on DraftKings and you can drop it down to 27.5. And on that under, you can get plus 105. So if you drop it down 1 point, you can actually get better odds than if you just keep it at 28.5 and take that team total. So if you think the Browns can hold the Ravens to less than 4 touchdowns, maybe that's something to look at. I don't feel great about a lot of the other stuff in this game. You know, the Browns team total is 16.5 points. I don't particularly love that. You know, that's too low to take an under, but I also don't trust this offense enough yet to be taking overs on their team total. So that's a couple of things that I'm looking at. There's also these point bands you can do on DraftKings, and you can get Ravens between 21 and 30 points. You can get that as well. That might be worth a look as well. Right now, that's plus 145 on DraftKings. So those are a few things I like. We're going to take a break, and then Mary Kay and Ashley are going to join in, and we're going to make our actual picks for this football game. Back on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, our Browns-Ravens preview edition of the podcast. Thanks to Lance Reisland for that scouting report. All right, let's get to it. It is time to make our picks. I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm just going to open it up. Does anyone doing it? Anyone? No one's jumping here. Okay, just making sure, because we've said it. There's a case to be made, and I will just point this out again. The Baltimore Ravens last year lost a heartbreaking primetime game in week 1. We're 9-point favorites against the Raiders. Raiders had the biggest money line on the board to win that game outright, and the Ravens blew a 2-score lead in week 2 and lost to an absolutely abysmal Raiders team. So there's precedent here. This has happened. The Ravens are funky sometimes, and they lose weird games, so it could happen. That said, I am going to pick the Ravens to win this game. I don't feel super comfortable about this. I am going to pick them to cover, but I don't think it's going to feel like a blowout. I think it's going to be one of those games where it's actually a little closer. I think it's going to be lower scoring, and I think the Ravens somehow kind of get to that number late in the game, whether it's a defensive touchdown with the Browns trying to drive late, whatever it might be, a late score by the Ravens, something like that. I don't think it's going to feel like a double-digit game. But I do think the Ravens are going to win this game. And I'm just kind of going with the number that popped in my head, which is why I'm picking them to cover. I just don't trust that number in an AFC North game. Division games early in the season, that's a really big number. I would never actually bet it. But I'm going to take the Ravens to win this game 24-12. But I don't think it's going to feel that bad. You know what I mean? Like it could be like 17-12 late in the game and the Ravens score. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Who wants to go next here?
I can go next if Mary Kay wants to go last.
Perfect.
All right. So, Dan, we actually have the same Baltimore score. I wrote down my score going into this, and I feel like I feel how you did last week. Like, I'm picking the Ravens and I don't feel good about it, but I'm trying to avoid the trap of, well, I've been around the Browns all week and have they just convinced me they're going to win? But I really don't think that's it. I think even in just 5 seasons of covering this team now, I've seen so many weird things happen in this matchup. Like, it's not going to surprise me at all if the Browns come out and win, but I feel like I have to stick more where I was on Sunday night after I watched this Ravens offense against the Bills and watched a shootout and what they were able to do, and how heartbreaking of a loss it was for them. So I'm going Baltimore 24, Cleveland 22. I don't think they're going to get the Ravens, that is, are going to get in that 40-point range again if it is a close game like this. Because obviously, I think if it's close, the Browns are slowing things down, controlling the pace, really making the Ravens play their game in that regard. But my heart wants to change my mind. My heart wanted to pick the Browns for this game, but I got to stick with my original gut feeling about this week.
Yeah, I mean, my fade the public theory would be in full effect here, right? Just pick the Browns because everybody's picking the Ravens, right? But again, you got to be honest with yourself when you make these picks. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It is what it is. Great, we'll get to write about a team that pulled an awesome upset on Sunday. Mary Kay, what are you picking?
Well, when I look back to week 1, and good for you, Dan, for picking the right winner of that game. You picked the Bengals to win that game.
I got the Browns score right in that game, too.
Oh, did you?
I did.
But the thing is, they should have won that game. I mean, the Browns should have won that game. They outplayed them in every single way. So even though my pick was wrong, I think my instincts were right about how I thought that game was going to go. I really thought the Browns defense was going to come through, and they did come through. The Browns defense came through in that game, and they played a hell of a game. And who knew that the kicker was going to miss 2 kicks of 33 and 36 yards, and that they were going to have 2 interceptions that go off the hands of your top 2 wide receivers. So the game went the way I kind of thought it was going to go. So that's why I don't feel the need to go against my instincts this week. You know what I mean? Like, because my instincts are that the Ravens are going to win this game. Now, sometimes you get into a situation where when you lose your pick the week before, you want to switch things up. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stick with my gut feeling that the Ravens at home are going to seize the moment and win this game on the day of their big 30th anniversary celebration with all these people back, all these players back in town, and all this energy in the stadium, and the Browns giving them some bulletin board material, and Derrick Henry, now being told that he is not hard to tackle and whatnot. They're going to want to stick it to Joe Flacco. Like we've talked about, there's no way John Harbaugh is going to want to let Joe Flacco come in there to M&T Bank Stadium and beat them and beat the quarterback that they cast him aside for. They just aren't going to want to let this happen. Again, the only way that I think it could happen is if Joe has a miracle in him and Miles. I think it would come down to Myles Garrett and Joe Flacco. Those 2 guys just somehow strapping the team on their back and making this happen. And we saw Deshaun Watson pull out the half of his life in Baltimore a couple of years ago. So stranger things have happened. I mean, remember, the Browns have won 4 out of the last 7 meetings. It's so hard to remember that. We always think that they are completely dominant and the Browns never have a chance. They do have a chance. They've won 4 of the last 7. So I'm going to stick with my gut feeling here. And I think it would be great fun for Browns fans, obviously, if the Browns can pull this off and stick it right back to the Ravens on their 30th anniversary day, which, of course, I'm on record. I've written it. I've said it. I don't think they should be doing that this weekend. I think it's insensitive, and I don't like it. And I hope that the Browns, just for that reason, can dig deep and find a victory in them. But I still feel like the Ravens are not going to go 0-2 in their own house on their big day. So I'm going Ravens 27-17.
All right, there we go. Our picks here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. We'll have another preview video. If anybody sleeps on it and wakes up on Friday and is like, you know what, I am going to pick the Browns, maybe you'll hear a different pick on that video. And then, of course, we'll have our official picks there as well. That's coming on Friday on our YouTube channel, which is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Get subscribed to that. We'll be going live on Sunday night once again, whatever happens in that football game. So just make sure you're subscribed there. Find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Instagram is Orange and Brown Talk. Twitter is Orange Brown Talk. X, I guess I should be calling it X by now. X is Orange Brown Talk. Appreciate Lance for the scouting report earlier. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.